is my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender.
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And our show today is called Clean Water Funding Crisis. And I have with me Ken Kurt. He's the Executive Director of the National Association of Clean Water Agency. Mr. Kurt grew up in New York City, and his background is an attorney and a lawyer, specializing in the environmental industry. And he wants to give something back to our community. And that's why he's the Executive Director for the National Association of Clean Water Agency. I'm glad to have you on our show.
Thank
Ken.
you, Frank. Appreciate being here.
Thank you. Ken, when I mentioned National Association of Clean Water Agency, what does that mean? What is it, and what mission is the agency involved in?
Well, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies is a national nonprofit association that represents the interests of wastewater utilities around the country. It was formed in 1970, a couple of years before Congress passed the landmark legislation, the Clean Water Act, and has as its mission protecting the interests and preserving the rights of those agencies as they do their job of protecting the environment.
Yes, it's very important because at the beginning of time, we did not have pollution. Maybe we didn't have the number of people the population that we have throughout the world, especially here in the United States. And at that time, no one was concerned too much at the beginning of the time how to treat wastewater. Now in the 21st century, we have a large population here in the United States, and we need agencies such as our agency, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, to make sure that we treat wastewater and make sure that we have clean water. And so I understand that the National Association of the Clean Water Agency used to be called by another name.
Yes, it was. It was called the Association of Metropolitan Sewerage Agencies, and about a year and a half ago we changed the name to the National Association of Clean Water Agencies for a very good reason. That reason is that whereas back in the early 1970s our members associated what they did with the cleanup of water and the treatment of sewage, today they associate what they do with actually cleaning up the water for swimming, for boating, for recreation, and that's what they do. So it's not simply treating sewage for the sake of treating sewage. It's treating that sewage to ensure that water quality around the country is enjoyed and preserved for the future generations.
Well, that's we changed our name also.
Yes, you did.
Before, we used to be called the Metropolitan Sanitary District of Greater Chicago, because the majority of our function that when we first became an agency under the statute of the state of Illinois, predominantly we treat wastewater. But now we changed it to Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, and we have our function, our main function that we do treat wastewater. We protect our water supply, which is Lake Michigan, because it's very important for us to make sure we protect our water supply, because they say that a person could live without food for about 30 days. But without water, without drinking water, a person could live cannot live more than 2 or 3 days. And that's why water is very precious. And besides protecting our water supply, we prevent pollution and flooding. And recently, about a year and a half ago, we took over stormwater management here in Cook County. And that's why our agency recognized that we have to change with the times, and that's why now we're called Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, because we're recycling what we treat now, and to protect our community.
Very good point.
Now, what role has the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District played in the National Association of Clean Water Agency?
The Reclamation District has been an incredible partner from the beginning. They were one of our founding members. They have participated on our board of directors for years and years and years. They have contributed in a lot of other ways as well. And we deal with a lot of complicated issues on the technical side and the research and development side. And the Reclamation District has always been there working with us, helping us, supporting us with financial contributions and technical expertise with regard to all the issues that we deal with. They've been a great supportive member of ours over the years.
You know, that's correct, because our agency, we're one of the very few agencies that have a research and development department. And we do an awful lot of research and development in biological and chemical pollution research. And because we do this research, we share it with all the other agencies that treat wastewater, because they may have a small water reclamation plant and may not be able to afford a research department. And I think this is what our agency plays a big role in, along with I don't know how many other agencies have a research and development out there, but there's very few. Because, you know, why? It's cost funding to fund your own research and development department.
And there may be some others out there, but I can assure you that the Reclamation District has the biggest and the most well-funded and the best research department in the country.
Oh yeah, you know, right now we're going to, and they tell me that we're going to have a study, a health study, on the effect of people in our waterways, fishing or maybe boating, if there's any health risks to the people there. So we're going to do a 3-year study. It's going to cost us about $3.7 million. And we hired the University of Illinois Health Department to make that study for us. And we have an independent board to analyze the data. Because when we do something like these type of studies, we prefer to have an independent board reviewing the data, so they could have an unbiased review of what study, about the study. And so this is what we do here in Cook County in our community.
And that's going to be extremely valuable study and provide us with a lot of information that we're going to be able to use back in Washington to deal with EPA on this very issue.
Oh yes, you know, because a lot of people don't realize that our agency, along with the other agencies throughout the United States that you represent, we are under the rules of the United States EPA,
Yes, you are.
And like us, we're here in the state of Illinois. Also, we're under the Illinois EPA, and we have to meet their criteria. And so this is why it's very important that we have an agency like yours to represent us and voice our concern on a national level to the U.S. EPA or the state EPA because they may want a rule that may be impossible for us to do.
That's correct.
Now, what are the priorities, advocacy goal of the National Association of Clean Water Agency?
Well, I can answer that in a number of ways. Probably the most simplistic way to answer it is we want to make sure that our agencies around the country have enough time, a realistic amount of time to do the job of cleaning up the nation's waters. Second, we want to make sure that those regulations that they're required to deal with are reasonable and are based in science and are actually going to result in cleaner water, as opposed to simply requiring agencies around the country to spend money needlessly. Third, we want to make sure that the federal government is there to provide levels of funding that will support our communities around the country. So time, regulations, and money are the three big issues that we work on. More specifically, we've worked on industrial pretreatment programs and biosolids management, security most recently, management issues. We got very involved in management issues when we had a privatization scare in the 90s. So we run the gamut of all kinds of issues and have dealt with different issues at different times. But today, the big ones are those that relate to wet weather, stormwater that you alluded to, and combined sewer overflows and sanitary sewer overflows, and our aging infrastructure and the need to replace it. And funding is another big issue that's still on the table that we need to address.
Well, you're correct. Funding is a big issue. Here in Cook County, I think the residents of Cook County is very fortunate to be living here in Cook County, because our agency, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, did receive funding back in the 1970s to start our what we call the TARP project, the Deep Tunnel.
Now I remember the TARP project.
Yes, and that was a couple $2 billion. And just recently, about 6 months ago, we just completed boring all of the deep tunnel, and that took over 30 years, about 30 years to bore 109 miles, 9 feet in diameter to 30 feet in diameter, about 200 feet below the ground. It's all through rock, and the reason why we did this is because we had a problem here at Cook County of flooding. Sure. As you mentioned, the majority of your older cities throughout the United States, I guess New York, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, we have combined sewers. And I don't know if it fell under the Clean Water Act or not, but called for separate sewers, sanitary and stormwater. And unfortunately, here in the Cook County area, to separate our sewers would be very costly, and that might not solve our flooding problem. So back in the 70s, we came in with a solution of doing the deep tunnel. And you talked about time. How long did it take us to do it? 30 years, over 30 years. It was a long time. Why did we do it? Regulation, because the Clean Water Act, because we were our confined sewer overflow was going into Lake Michigan, or we had a high intensity rain. If our interceptor sewers couldn't handle all of that, we used to open the locks and used to put an untreated waste in Lake Michigan. Now we have the deep tunnel, so if we do have that type of activity, we'll just discharge that into our deep tunnel. But we're not yet completed. We still have to complete our reservoirs, and that's where funding comes into, because we have to complete the McCook and the Thornton Reservoir, and funding for that is about $600 million each, and 75% of them comes from the government. And right now, every year we pray and hope that we get funding from the government, because every year we have to go lobby for those dollars. And so, as you mentioned, those three things. You mentioned what? Timing?
Timing.
Regulation?
Regulation.
Yes. And what was the third one again?
Money.
Money. Money. Because who pays for all of this, these projects to make sure that we have clean water in the United States within our community? The taxpayers. The taxpayers pay for all of this here. And so for us as the taxpayers to pay for a project, there have to be a cost benefit. That whatever they're going to to pay through their taxes and give to us, we have to make sure that it's going to benefit the community.
That's a really good point, and one of the things that's really important to recognize and remember is the fact that when we started this ambitious program back in 1972 with the passage of the Clean Water Act over a presidential veto, by the way.
Over a presidential veto?
Over a presidential veto, the federal government was paying more than 80% of the tab for municipalities to come into compliance with those ambitious requirements. Today, they're paying 3%, and they're no longer in the form of grants, they're in the form of loans, and now they're saying that they don't even want to do that, that they want local governments to charge more, and invite the private sector to invest in their communities and maybe take over their facilities as a way to move forward. In our view, that's not the way it should be done, and it's just plain wrong.
Now, did I hear you correctly that when the Clean Water Act became a law, and that was in 1970, that the government provided 80% funding?
Maybe even more.
More? And now in the 21st, now we're in the 21st century. That was in the 20th century. Now in the 21st century, they're only providing 3%, a decrease of 77%.
That's correct. The way EPA explains it today is they talk about the 3 waves, where the first wave was a wave of grants, which I mentioned before was vetoed by the president at the time. And then in the 1980s, they wanted to eliminate the grant program entirely, and the compromise was a loan program, which they vetoed as well. And then the third wave that we're talking about today is to turn the program over to the private sector, on the grounds that they could do it better and cheaper and more efficiently than the public sector, which is simply not the case.
And the private sector, what we're talking about is a firm or a large corporation will come in and privatize and maybe charge more than what they're paying through taxes.
Definitely charge more because they have to make a profit and they have to pay taxes.
Yes. You know, I saw a play, Ken, here in Chicago at Columbia University, and the play was Urinetown.
I saw that play in New York.
and you know, when I saw that play, it reminded me, because that's what we treat. We treat wastewater, and majority of the wastewater that we treat is what a person flushed down the toilet. And the play talks about that if a person had to use a restroom, there was a charge to that, to the use of that restroom, and that caused chaos. And maybe if they were to turn over to a private agency, it may be similar to that play, Urinetown, that I saw.
It could be, but even in the play, it didn't work out to the advantage of the privatizer.
No. No. You know, you mentioned the Clean Water Act. How successful has the Clean Water Act been in cleaning up our national waterways since they reduced the funding from 80% to 3% now?
That's a good question, Frank. You know, this year we're celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, and we've made a lot of progress. There's no question that the water quality today is much better than it was in 1972. But we can't rest on our laurels. So much more needs to be done. The job is simply incredibly complex and comprehensive. Is going to cost a lot of money. So while the act has been successful, a lot of us wonder whether it's going to be able to sustain the kind of future efforts we need to meet those ambitious goals.
And to in the future, we're talking about time
again,
regulation, and it's a big funding. Funding is a big thing because everything's going up. Here in Cook County, our real estate taxes are going up, and the way the Water Reclamation District received their revenue is through real estate taxes. and there's a line item on our tax bill that they have to pay taxes to the Water Reclamation District. And so funding is going to be a big problem, because I doubt if our agency, Water Reclamation District, could fund all of the projects that are required to meet the Clean Water Act.
Well, they're going to be joined by a lot of other communities around the country, because regardless of who has run the numbers, whether it's EPA or an organization that I'm involved with, the Water Infrastructure Network, or the Congressional Budget Office, or the General Accounting Office, there is a funding gap of about $500 billion for wastewater, and probably another $500 billion for drinking water. And that means that despite the fact that local governments around the country are spending today $63 billion a year on water-related infrastructure, it's not enough. And EPA will tell you as well that unless there's a significant additional investment in water infrastructure over the next 15, 20 years, that water quality in this country is going to be at the same level that it was in 1970 before Congress passed the Clean Water Act.
Yeah,
and we will have wasted all that time and all that money and all that effort.
You know, they say, you know, you read your data, and of all, you know, we have a lot of water here on Earth. We got the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the glaciers, but only 1% of all of this water on Earth is fresh water, they say. And they also say that 33% of that 1% fresh water comes from the Great Lakes. 33% comes from the Great Lakes. And as I mentioned before, that a person could live without water for about 2 days. And that's why water is very precious. And that's why we're very fortunate of having the National Association of Clean Water Agency be our spokesperson to let the government, Illinois EPA or US EPA. Yeah, we have to deal with the states.
Right.
And other agencies in Washington to inform them of the situation that we're in here in the United States, because as I mentioned, here in our area, and we got Cook County, we got the 6 counties, is that a lot of us depend on Lake Michigan, because you know, treating wastewater and water, they both work together. And that's why if you mention 20 years from now, we're going to be in a big problem if we don't have funding to upgrade our infrastructure. Because now, how will we get this funding, or how what are the obstacles, including funding challenge, to further water quality progress?
Well, the obstacles are there's a lot of competition out there for federal dollars, whether it's currently the war in Iraq, or issues related to Hurricane Katrina, or healthcare. There are a lot of things going on, but at the same time, you have to wonder, why there is a trust fund for highways that provides the state's $33 billion a year in funds to support our interstate highway system. There's an airport trust fund that supports our airports to the tune of about $11 or $12 billion a year. And you have to ask yourself, well, if it's good enough for highways and good enough for airports, why not isn't it good enough for water? If you ask the American people, and we've hired pollsters who've done major national surveys over the past few years, the American people would support a trust fund and would be willing to pay for it for clean water. That's how high they regard the need to deal with this issue. More important than highways, more important than airports. Clean water. Only second to education.
Second to education?
Second to education.
And you mentioned that we have a lot of obstacles out there, and we have also a lot of other problems out there. And the problem that I see is on a cost-benefit analysis, which is more important for our society, for our environment. Because naturally we need education, we need health, naturally we need our roads. We have science. We have global warming. Global warming now. Everyone is talking about global warming, but water has an effect on global warming too.
It sure does.
See? And so where does one decide where to spend this money? Is there a group in our government that decides on a cost-benefit analysis, or is politics deciding all of this?
Well, there are a series of laws that, in our case, decides it for us. As I mentioned, the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, and it laid out very, very strict time frames and very, very strict requirements to achieve certain levels of water quality. And we've made, tremendous progress. But today, when you look at that statute and you hear people talking about, as you said, the need to look at water as water, and you really have to wonder whether that statute is going to work for the future. It doesn't give anybody the flexibility or the discretion to look at things on a watershed basis and make really good decisions from a cost-benefit point of view at the local level. The statute is a command and control statute. You do it our way, and if you don't do it, we're going to fine you. It's very simple.
Well, that's true. Our what we do here in Cook County, and I guess it occurs throughout the United States, is that what we do here in Cook County has an effect going all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, because when we treat wastewater, we discharge that into our channels. It goes into the Des Plaines River.
Mm-hmm.
From the Des Plaines River, it goes into the Illinois River. From the Illinois River, it goes into the Mississippi. And from Mississippi, it goes down into the Gulf of Mexico.
That's right.
So how we treat wastewater, and we're following the Illinois EPA and the U.S. EPA requirements, has an effect traveling throughout the United States. And under the Clean Water Act, we have to abide by the rules.
That's correct.
And so I think every other wastewater agencies out there that treat that does water reclamation treatment has an effect on other communities also.
Yes, they do, and that's the interconnection between the problem that we're talking about. What you do here affects people downstream and suggests that there is a water cycle. As some folks that I know say, water is life, and infrastructure makes it happen.
Yes, and we do have a problem, clean water funding crisis, that our government, as Ken Kurt, Executive Director, mentioned of the National Association of Clean Water Agency, we do need a trust fund for the